Hey, everybody, this is David Sable coming to you once again for New York Festival's Creativity from the Other Side, where we talk to the most amazing people in our own industry and elsewhere, people who just exude creativity, but not the kind of creativity we talk about all the time, but the kind of creativity that impacts our lives, the world, and of course, our work and our clients. But people that ordinarily we might not always have the opportunity to speak to. And today I am so excited. I can't even tell you how excited I am to be able to introduce to you an FOD. And those of you who listen know that FOD is Friend of David, is all of the people I interview either are before or become after. However, in this case, Friend of David stands for Family of David, because Des is truly family. Destiny Chambers, I should say Destiny K Chambers.
Always include the K.
Since you became a VP. We'll discuss that maybe a little bit later, but where this K came from after you became a VP, but that's good, and I love it.
It was always there. The K stands for danger. The K is silent.
Oh, there you go. So Destiny Danger Chambers, who is Vice President and Head of Marketing for Lippe Taylor Group, one of the primo PR groups in New York City. Destiny and I worked together for quite a number of years, and maybe she'll talk about that a little bit too. We're very proud that not only is she chairman of our DE&I Advisory Board, which we'll talk about, and that's going to be a big part of our conversation today, but also the DE&I jury, which is related to the board. And I think that the work that she and the board are doing to make sure that all of our juries across everything that we do in New York festivals are in fact diverse, inclusive, and show equality. And we'll talk about what that actually means in a moment. She's also part of the Ford's Communications Council. She's a founding member, and she is a former youth empowerment program leader for Urban Underground. And so everything I know about this woman is amazing. She has been my teacher and has taught me a tremendous amount. And I'm always grateful to her. So friend of Family of David, Destiny Danger Chambers. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm equally as excited about participating. Like you mentioned, we have a very long history, and well before many other people would have said that you were a mentor to me, I had made you a mentor to me just by watching everything that you did. So many of
we all make mistakes. I'm sorry about that.
I would definitely say that many of the accomplishments that I have made have been inspired by a lot that I learned from you. So it's very exciting to be in this position right now.
And we're going to talk about that actually, because we're going to talk about something where I learned something incredibly important from you that has impacted me in incredibly deep ways. And that's only one of the many things, but one thing in particular, and we'll talk about how that has manifested itself in different ways. But first, let's just talk about Destiny, the person. Tell us about when you first came to New York. Tell us about youth empowerment. Go back.
Yeah.
Go back a few years to your beginnings. I'm honored to say I know your mom, and she and I have much simpatico when it comes to you and your behavior. I'm sorry about that. I can't help it.
That's all right. That's all right. Okay, talking about my history. Well, first we're going to start with me coming to New York, and then we'll take a look back, most specifically at the DE&I work, because I feel like DE&I has become a huge buzzword in the industry, most specifically after 2020 and some of the events of 2021. And there are a lot of people who have been doing the work for a very long time before it became particularly excitable and important to a number of corporations. But telling the story of New York specifically, I had an extensive background in doing a number of large scale events. I even worked with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, which is kind of like the New York Times of Milwaukee, in their marketing department, and did some work for them on a contract basis for a lot of large events that were happening in the city. And so I felt like it was time for me to transition to a much larger space to be able to get beyond the ceiling that I think a small city particularly offers to individuals who are vastly creative. And that's not to speak solely to myself. I think that happens for a number of people, and many people from my hometown actually ended up here.
Just if I may, I don't think New York can contain you. Let's be really clear.
That's extremely flattering. I have had a number of really amazing experiences here, and I will say that the city grew me. But I came here actually with $600, 3 bags. I had no place to live. I don't know how real we can be, but I was sharing a bed with my friend and his boyfriend in a rented room, and I did not have a job. I had contacted a staffing agency a week before I got here. I told my mom, like, I'm leaving in 5 weeks. I have a one-way ticket. It'll be a great 5 weeks, so it'll be a horrible 5 weeks. You tell me what that's going to be like. And I got here and I just hit the ground running. But the second week that I was here, I was doing some work with a staffing agency already. And then that transitioned into me getting into, what was it, Excel marketing, now known as Zeta Interactive. And that was kind of my first real marketing experience here in New York. And that just continued to develop. I then went to the fashion side and did some work as a senior consultant with Burberry Corporate, working with some of their clients. So a little bit of like an account management type of style. And then from there, I went to work with you. And I spent 2.5 years under your tutelage. And I don't know if you remember, but in my first 2 weeks there, when I was just the administrative assistant, I was very silent. I watched a lot of what David did so that I could better understand who he was and understand the industry a little bit more. And then after that 2 weeks, I really tried to dive in with a greater sense of that understanding, a greater sense of how to work in the marketing space. And from there, everything has evolved. I went to the marketing team thereafter. And from there, I got picked up by Lippe Taylor. So here we are. That was an extensive story. But just going back to the DE&I space, as you mentioned, I was a part of the youth empowerment program for Urban Underground, which is, a youth-led organization that focuses on social justice. It focuses on health, and it teaches young people how to understand the system and how to overcome some of the systemic setbacks. And so I went on to become a leader of that organization. And then shortly thereafter, I became the co-chair of the local organizing committee for the Millions More movement, which actually took hundreds of underrepresented students and individuals in the city to the 10th anniversary of the Million Man March. And from there, I then took those skill sets into the corporate work that I was doing. And over the years, I've continued to expand on how I best represent all cultures, not just Black culture. And so I'm really excited to now be evolving into this space where I'm getting to be a part of adding to something so specific to our industry, like, awards. And it's been an exciting journey, definitely.
Let's hold the awards for a second. I want to go back to something you just said, because I think it's really critical. And we're going to press on that a little bit. So you want to represent all cultures. Mm-hmm. And it's something you and I have talked about quite a lot. The truth of the matter is we both know that's not always a good thing to say. There are many people who feel that you're either appropriating, or you actually don't care, or you shouldn't care, which is maybe even worse, but you shouldn't represent all cultures. And I think what we've seen, and certainly through some work that I've been involved with the past 6 months, I spoke to the DE&I leaders in some of the biggest corporations in the country, some of the HR leaders of some of the biggest corporations in the country. And in pursuing the issues they're having around DE&I and their ERGs, one of the things that we discovered in our discussions with everybody, and when you push them and they get honest, are the silos.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I asked one leader in one of a company that is well known for being out there, progressive. I said, tell me, like, do your ERGs, and maybe you'll just explain to everybody just exactly what an ERG is, but do your ERGs talk to each other?
Mm-hmm.
Do they ever share issues? Do they ever share their fears? And he goes, it's the biggest problem that we have. He said, each one is siloed. So start by telling us a little bit about ERGs, what they are, sort of the development of it, and then what you think about the issue. And I know that, by the way, I just want to point out, after she tells you that, I will tell you that Destiny was the first person that I met who didn't just expand ERGs, who didn't just look to see how they spoke, but actually helped others create their own ERGs. So talk about understanding what it means and taking your empathy. We'll talk about empathy.
Yeah, yeah.
Other places. So
yeah, so employee resource groups, which is what ERG stands for, are ways for people to find another sense of belonging within the corporate space. It allows you to celebrate your culture and also educate people on your culture within your work family. And we spend so much time in the workspace that it's really important to have that sense of recognition and have that sense of understanding. And the reality is many people don't know a ton about anyone outside of their own culture. I recently had a conversation with a friend of mine who works in the DE&I space, and he talked about how everyone is kind of on this DE&I journey. And it starts with a bit of like a sense of indifference where all you know is your own culture. And so therefore you don't have an innate interest in actually learning about other cultures. And then there's this space where, which I think a lot of people experienced in 2020 and 2021, where something impactful happens or you learn something and you grow from there, that you acknowledge that you didn't have an awareness or even an interest in learning about these other cultures. And from there, you expand into genuine curiosity and a desire to actually learn from these other cultures and embrace what it is that their cultures represent, and then also participate where you can. And so I think that we first have to acknowledge that everybody is not in the same space of evolution. And that's what we're dealing with right now. People with all of these differing levels of desires and acknowledgements of other cultures. And so the work that I've done with the ERGs personally, I have had a lot of great experiences with integrating other cultures. One of the things that I got to be a part of briefly when I was at my previous organization, VML YNR Legacy, shout out, is that we took groups like our Native American ERG, our AAPI ERG, and then our African American ERG, and we wove together these shared backgrounds, like our cultural shared backgrounds. For example, the things that we have understood around metaphysics. Everybody is so about this spiritual life, but these are deep parts of these cultures. And how can we come together and actually talk about that? Another example is that right now we're entering Black History Month in just a few weeks. But the very first thing we acknowledged is that Lunar New Year falls in February this month. So our question was, how do we leave space to acknowledge that? Or is there an opportunity for us to come together and represent both cultures? And so I think that that siloed sentiment that you mentioned is primarily related to these differing levels of people not really being in a place of being desirous of understanding other cultures because they've never had to, they've never been exposed to other cultures in a great way. And the beauty is that now the ERGs are becoming more popular in different companies, is that you can actually create those opportunities now to find ways to come together.
If we have more destinies, we can. Oh, it is no, but seriously, it is an issue. So let's go back and let's just follow this thought a little bit about what it means to sort of follow your culture and to be
Right.
interested in other cultures. So, and here's where I'll tell a story. It's a story that I've written about. Um, that Destiny was a big part of. So, at the very, very beginning of the creation of Black Lives Matter, somebody gave me a gift because they know that these are issues that are very important to me. And it was the most beautiful handmade leather basketball that you can imagine. It was gorgeous. And it was half white and half black. And I thought, wow, that is like so amazing. And it said on it, all lives matter. And I thought, wow, what a great message. Like, what could be bigger than that? And remember, this is the very, very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it in my window. And as Destiny knows, and those who have visited my office back in the day know that I had what my children used to call the FAO Schwartz of corporate offices.
Yes.
Lots of shelves and lots of toys and tchotchkes and things. And I put it there and it was sort of like displayed because it was all glass walls. It wasn't actually an office, it was a sitting room. And one day Destiny comes to me and she says, get rid of it. I said, what are you talking about? She said, you got to get rid of that basketball. I said, are you crazy? Like, you know how much that must have cost? That's the most beautiful thing. Like, it's such a great message. I love it. Why would I get rid of it? She said, sit down. So I sat down. And what Destiny said to me was not, it wasn't an issue of disrespect and it wasn't an issue of appropriating anything. The issue is that if it's great, and it reminded me when I was a kid, I had a poster in my room that said, I love mankind, it's people I can't stand.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the opposite of that. It's this notion of somehow that, we love, mankind is great. It's like awesome. But I'm really not paying attention. It's not like I can't stand it. I'm just not paying attention to that. And Bessie said it's exactly the opposite. She said, first you have to start here. And if you start here with Black Lives Matter for that issue, then that's great. It's love mankind. That's beautiful. But that's not the issue. So I took the ball and I threw it down the chute, like in the garbage. I never saw it again. I didn't hide it. I didn't keep it. It's not put away as, a remembrance of anything. I threw it away. And that was an important message to me because, as many of you know, that as the year went on, there was so much controversy over all these issues. But I never saw the controversy because I got it. I understood it. And I understood this notion of first be true to a cause, and then you can expand it. But if you don't get it, you can't expand. You can't love mankind if you don't get the Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I would say
I
that's
express
fair.
it the right way.
I would say that's fair. I also think that a lot of people there are many people who do understand this, and that's why they say it. But I think that there are a lot of people who don't actually know that All Lives Matter was a direct rebuttal to Black Lives Matter. And history has actually shown us that they don't. The events of 2020 has further solidified and cemented that reality. And it's not just Black lives. We've also seen the AAPI lives don't matter. We've also seen that Jewish lives don't matter. Like, that's the problem. That's the problem in itself. The sentiment behind All Lives Matter was intended to be a rebuttal to individuals who are suggesting that they are having experiences in life that are showing them that they do not matter to our country.
I couldn't agree more. And by the way, those people don't believe that all lives matter. They believe their lives matter.
Exactly.
So, which I think is actually the irony of the whole thing.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not like they've laggarded up to a higher cause. They've actually laggarded it down.
Exactly.
Using all lives it's sort of like a veneer. It's a way of hiding.
The suggestion is that by saying Black Lives Matter, there is some form of exclusionary attitude associated with it or exclusionary behavior. But the point was, the intention was to bring awareness to the fact that activities were happening over the course of several years that showcased that there was not the same value on others' lives as there were for some. Behaviors were happening that displayed that it was much less important to treat certain individuals fairly. And that was the primary reason that it was important for me to share that with you, most specifically because as somebody that I deeply cared about, the last thing I wanted was for you to be conveying a message that I knew did not actually represent who you were.
Well, I appreciate it, but it was an important message, and one that has informed me over the past however many years it's been. It's been a few, and really, I think it was critical. So I just want to thank you again for that, because I think that it has, and in my writings and in just about everything that I do, this notion again of being true to a thing before you can be true to everything.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing I want to quickly expand on. That's a sentiment that I often have. I think that people don't realize sometimes the house is on fire for certain cultures. And so what you have to do is recognize that in the moment, this culture is being deeply affected right now. And therefore, we need to give a little bit of additional focus to those individuals. Additionally, we've seen, especially across the last year, as companies are showcasing their diversity numbers and things like that, there are certain groups, there are certain ethnicities that are deeply underrepresented. And therefore, just like you said, sometimes you have to give a little bit more attention to that cause. And then as you provide equity in that space, you move on to the next underrepresented group that may have been slightly more represented than this group, but this group actually did not have the same, representation. So now it's like a snowball effect. And as you continue to commit, you're growing as an organization, you're growing as an individual. And that's the sentiment behind that,
Can I be your campaign manager and we'll run you for president? Like, honestly,
you will definitely be my campaign manager, David, for sure.
Well, that's for sure. But let's go back to diversity. We're going to come back to this because I think, and again, I don't want to embarrass you and keep on embarrassing you, but the truth is that not everybody is that involved. Mm-hmm. And as I said, when I speak to and you're being actually very kind to a lot of corporations, because when I spoke to them, I'm giving them credit because they admitted it. As they came to that point, they said, we got a problem. Mm-hmm. It's not that we don't want to, it's that they don't want it. It's that groups, we're just not able to figure this out. And so a lot of them are struggling with it. But I want to come back to the festivals for a minute.
Okay.
And just talk about the way we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then what that means. And what's interesting is I usually look at it as diversity, inclusion, and equity. The problem being that that's like a really shitty way of looking at it because DIE is like not as good as
Yeah, true.
But in my view, that's actually the important connection. So let's just talk about it for a second. I'm going to read. Let me pull up the sheet here so everybody can see that I'm reading something and don't have to look down completely. So diversity means something is composed of differing elements or qualities. I love that. Including, but not limited to race, ethnicity, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, disability, age, is one I like, culture, religion, political perspective, and more.
Yeah, that was concepted amongst the D&I board. So I'm glad to see.
That's why I'm reading it. So what do you think? So tell us about that, because that is a very evolved view.
Firstly, I don't think that we could be in a position of advisory if that was not the stance that we took. I think it's important for people to understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a bottom line. It's not a numbers game. It's not about like how many people can we have represented. It's expansive. It's actually about understanding each one of the terms in the, in the DE&I sphere. It's about actually recognizing that it's about diversity, literally having individuals that are all different, actually having people who are all different from different backgrounds, from different walks of life, from different ethnicities, actually, making people feel like they belong, which is like that inclusive piece, understanding their individual backgrounds, who they are, how they were raised, what their life experiences are, and making them feel seen, making them feel as though their experience is of actual significance. And then that equity piece, like you said, is just about ensuring that all of those individuals actually are treated fairly and in the same way, so that nobody feels that they are less than, and nobody feels that they are unseen. And that's how it should be. There are many people that I know of different walks of life, of different backgrounds, of different ethnic groups, and they are equivalent in my mind and in my heart when it comes to how I showcase my love, my friendship, my work as a colleague, whatever the role or relationship is, because every single one of them is of significance and every part of their life means something to me.
Okay, so before I get emotional, let me just move on to this a little bit, because I think this is a very important discussion. So first of all, I mean, as you and I both know, very often this discussion ends up being very singular. Mm-hmm. So very often it's a gender issue. It could be a people of color issue. Mm-hmm. It could be something else. But typically I would say this is probably, if it would fall into two bigger categories that people would like to take it, it might be one or the other, very rarely both, very rarely more, as the way you and this board, and again, I give New York festivals an incredible amount of honor here for doing this, because I do believe that they might be way ahead of everybody else in the field when it comes to thinking this way. Mm-hmm. So, you've heard me talk about this before. I'm always worried that when you stop at diversity, to your point, it becomes a numbers game. And it's an easy numbers game, which is why gender very often is the thing that we start with, because it's so easy. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to say, 50% women, 50% men, whatever. Today, it's maybe a little more complex than that, but it doesn't matter. It's so easy. It's a percentage game. Mm-hmm. And you and I have sat in those meetings where we show the percentages.
Yep.
It looks really great. It's, oh my God, look what we've achieved. This is amazing. Yep. But then when you get below it, what you find is that, you've got like a particular level of people that are where you have that ability to say, when you add it into the totality, it looks really great, right? Like I would bet you that, you go to big fulfillment centers, or you go to Uber, and they could say, oh my God, we got more diversity than anybody in the world.
Yeah.
Of course they do, because the people who are picking and packing and the people who are driving come from those backgrounds. Hello. Like,
exactly.
Like let's be real. Let's take a look at the board. Let's take a look at the ELT, executive leadership.
Exactly.
Or whatever. And that's where the picture changes.
Absolutely.
So I think that you've hit it on the head with diversity. We're not diverse if we're not diverse.
Yeah.
And if all we do is lean into one sort of diversity, we've solved nothing.
Absolutely. And I think that also leans into that sentiment, which I think a lot of people just don't understand, which is equity. That's where it actually falls. It falls into having equivalent opportunities for everyone. And when there is no representation in your board, and there is no representation in your executive leadership, and there is no representation in your senior leadership, it tells the individuals, primarily of color or women, that they'll never, ever be considered in equivalence with the individuals who have made it to those levels. And that devastates the ideation around what can be accomplished. And it also breeds, kind of like intercultural
Or,
debate.
yeah, absolutely. But also, as you know, again, another issue we've talked about many times is that if I see nobody like me
Mhm.
above me, it's very hard for me to imagine myself and to visualize myself getting to that place.
Absolutely. Like
Right?
it's not only hard for me to visualize it, but it's also putting me in a position to think that if I do make it, only one of us can be there. So now I'm
Right.
competing with the people who look like me and having contention with them as I'm attempting to be that one person.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. So let's go to inclusion before we get to equity. Although we're gonna drop the acronym because we don't like DIE. But
Mhm.
let's go to let's go to inclusion. So what your group has come up with is that inclusion is the practice of including and accommodating people who have historically been excluded, which is great. But I just want to put maybe some practical to it, right? So I've done well on diversity.
Mhm.
Like I think, hey, this is great. And even when I get down to actually looking at how it might fall out and how I've parsed it, not bad. Like I'm moving, definitely.
Mhm.
But here's what happens, as you and I both know, and many others know. You get into the meetings, and somehow the diversity doesn't show itself up in the inclusion meeting. Those people might be sitting at the table,
Oh,
but
for sure.
like, hey, they really don't have a say.
Yeah.
Or they
Absolutely.
might not be sitting at the table. They're just like, I say, oh my God, like, look at my team. It's so diverse. But then when we get into the meeting to discuss what's actually going to happen, somehow that table doesn't look so diverse.
Absolutely. I mean, you kind of touched on a very common phrase, which is having a seat at the table. Everyone wants a seat at the table, but what we're realizing is that once they get that seat, it doesn't actually mean that they're going to be empowered. There are a lot of people who have been moved into senior roles, a lot of people of color in the past 2 years that have been moved into senior roles, but don't actually have any leverage or were not set up to actually succeed. They're not given teams, they're not given the support they need, all of the things that should be allotted to anyone else, all of the things that are being allotted to anyone else. So you're in the room, but you have no real impact. And that's of no value, especially when many of these people who come from these cultural backgrounds, who these different cultural backgrounds, have something unique to add to what's being produced and to what's being created, especially when you're speaking to communities that haven't necessarily been broken through to in the work that we're doing in like advertising and PR, and you're not leveraging some of those communities that you have access to in that space.
So let me also add to that and tell me what you think. And because I think there's another piece of this that's also dangerous. So I have a very close friend. We won't mention his name or exactly what he does, but you'll
Mhm.
know. Very well-known journalist, um, Black, African American, POC, whatever we want to, whatever, which he's all of the above.
Mhm.
And he found himself in this incredibly powerful company that he's in, despite the fact that his reputation is bigger than any cultural silo could ever possibly hold him in, being the Black guy.
Mhm.
And he hated it. And that's his word, not mine. And he called me one day and said, David, this is like the craziest thing. He said, every meeting that I go into about the corporation, it's like all of a sudden I'm the Black guy.
Mhm.
And they expect me to comment only about that. He goes, what the hell? He goes,
Yeah.
all day long, I'm representing the world in
Mhm.
what I do. And now I come into a meeting and they just want me to be that one thing.
Yep. I mean, it comes from the sentiment that Black people are somehow a monolith, that they're all the same, which is where some of those really ingrained mindsets that people have seen through things like television and the news. I was watching the same news that, anyone else have been watching. And I was being told that we were violent and that we were aggressive and that we were all of these things. And I began to believe that about my own culture as well. So the interactions that you're having, even in the workplace, are, again, cementing that idea. So you can't really respond certain ways. You can't really, interact certain ways because you're afraid that this misperception will be placed on you. But in the same token, you're then seen as the one person who can actually speak to your community. And I am not like just because I'm Black doesn't mean we're all the same. It doesn't mean that we even culturally subscribe to the same interests. There is going to be somebody who is much more uniquely qualified to speak to the sentiment than I am, because that hasn't been my life experience. And that's how it should be perceived. And that's how it should be, that's what people should be thinking when they're actually developing teams.
And so that's the point of inclusion, right? It's inclusion as a person. Right? It's inclusion, but obviously you carry with you your cultural and personal and ethnic and religious and whatever persona. That's important. That makes you who you are. But the notion of inclusion is not to be the Black guy in the room or the Jewish guy in the room or the Asian in the room or whatever. It's to be a person in the room.
Yeah.
Who has a point of view.
Yeah.
And is representing everything about themselves to everybody else.
Yes, I love that. And I agree 100%.
So then let's go to equity, because I'm going to tell you my view of equity. So equity then, so that's inclusion, right? So first I need diverse, I need lots of people. I need inclusion. I need to include them. It's not just enough to have a seat at the table. I have to have a piece of the conversation.
Yep.
That becomes critical. So now equity. The way your committee has written it, I think is really, really interesting. Equity means justice and equal opportunity, free from bias or favoritism.
Absolutely. Equity is something that I probably have a biased opinion about, which is unfortunate, but it's true, because it goes back to this snowball effect that I was talking about earlier. I think that we're all in a space as people, and most specifically within companies, where we're trying to understand and create equity for all. And what that actually means to a certain extent is an act of discrimination, but it's not inherently biased or racist. It is focusing on a group of individuals who are greatly underrepresented, bringing them to higher levels or equivalent levels of groups that are overly represented until you reach a sentiment of equivalence, so that they're represented consistently throughout the entire organization. And so I think that a lot of times that's not how organizations are looking at it, but you start with, you have to, to a certain extent, you have to create a focus on those who are underrepresented in order to bring about a sentiment of equality that doesn't currently exist. And it's okay, because you won't have to do that forever. You won't have to do it forever, because you will have created equity throughout your organization. You'll have given more opportunities to the individuals who never had them.
So I'm going to tell you the way I look at it, which I totally agree with everything you said, which is slightly more simplistic. Mm-hmm. Equity to me is ownership. I want to give everybody ownership. I want everyone to feel diverse, as we said. So now it's different, right? Different people representing many different things. Inclusion, total inclusivity, not just seat at a table, but voice and discussion. And then I want to give everybody the same ownership. Ownership of, I'm not talking just giving you like 5 shares of stock, but right. Ownership in outcome. Ownership in the opportunity. Ownership in everything that happens. But it's ownership. It's like you need to own it. You need to be a part of it, because now, if all I'm doing is saying, okay, it's just an equal opportunity, it's bias, then I've sort of like isolated you and said, okay, I got a problem. Like, okay, great, we're going to shower you because we've mistreated you, versus saying, which is also important,
Yeah. Yeah.
but also saying, no, I want you to own this. You own it as much as I own it. My success, your success are linked, inextricably linked. And if we can actually make those three things happen, then we've changed the world.
I see what you're saying. I'd like to understand a little bit more from your end, the ownership piece, because I don't know that I completely understand how one owns their opportunities for equity.
So you don't own your opportunity for equity.
Mm.
What you own is the outcome of it all. I need to create the environment that makes that just standard operating,
Mm-hmm.
right? That we all sit at this table because we all have equity in this discussion.
Yeah.
We all have equity in the outcome.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. I totally
Right?
get
We
what you
all
mean.
have equity in anything that happens here, way beyond owning like 5 shares of stock.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then that makes my share of voice, it makes my inclusion, it makes it real. Because
Yeah.
now I feel, yeah, of course I'm going to speak up. Of course I'm going to be part of this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because
I totally get that.
I sit here because I have the same right by ownership, if you will, that everybody has. It's not like you've thrown me a bone. I don't want to throw people bones.
Yeah, I get that. I appreciate that. And that's why, I think that I appreciate the order in which you've chosen to place DE&I, making it DI and E, because unless you are given the actual power to make impact, which is a part of that inclusivity, you can never actually be a part of the ownership.
Exactly.
Because you've never been given the equity, you've never been given the power to impact the organization or to impact things that are happening around you. So you can't even own it because it's not really, you're not really included.
Exactly.
So I get exactly what you mean.
Good. Oh, look at that point. No, seriously, but you know me, I'm very passionate about this because I think
Absolutely.
that it does change. So let's move on a little bit to the festivals and
Mhm.
just, and I'm going to tell a story that I shared with you earlier. When we started to think about the festivals and we looked at the makeup of the juries, obviously, like so many, we knew we had a problem. And no matter what we did, we just weren't successful enough. Now, some might have said, hey, like, it's great. Like, look, it called out certain people and said, hey, look what we have. But we were not comfortable. New York Festivals was not comfortable. We knew we had to do more. And we reached out and we worked with different organizations. And, to be fair, we went to an organization that was primarily built around Black executives and said, hey, help us. Like, we're trying to do this here. Like, we need help. Like, we're not asking you what to do. We're not suggesting that we know. When the contract is suggesting we don't know. We're jealous. And the answer to us was, versus your answer and the answer of the people that you brought in and who become part of our group here, was, well, no, you don't have enough people. So until you do, we don't want to be involved. And it's like, okay, maybe I wasn't clear. Let me start again. I apologize. I didn't express myself well. We've got this problem, see? Like, we don't have, exactly. Yeah, you don't have enough. When you do, call us. And my answer was, like, you're missing the point. When we have enough, I don't need to call you.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, and so we were stuck for a year until Destiny showed up and we had this brainstorm, and the New York Festival started the DE&I group, the advisory board, And with a specific goal of destiny.
Actually being diverse, equitable, and inclusive across all of the awards that were being offered, and diving a little bit deeper into that in the sense that we wanted to get beyond the numbers yet again. We wanted to get beyond the numbers and dig into how did you research the communities you're trying to impact? Who actually was working in the production to create?
So one second. Now you're talking about the award. Hold off on the awards for a second.
Oh, okay.
just even start with the juries, like to make sure that our juries were fairly representative and represented what we think we should be representing.
Yeah. So the goal was to actually find people who cared in the same way that I think NYFA was showing that they were caring. And then on top of that, how I personally was passionate about this particular focus, how passionate I was about DE&I across several years. And so when I spoke with Scott about this, I was kind of like drilling this forward so that we didn't let it fall by the wayside. Like we need to do this tomorrow. We need to meet with people tomorrow. And I told him, I know groups of individuals across many different organizations who care about this in the same way and are already driving these things forward. So how do we bring them into the same space so that we're also being held accountable? Because I can't say that just because I care or just because I have some kind of background in DE&I that I get everything. I can't say that I am culturally aware of everyone's backgrounds or that I even understand them in a way where I am offering equity or I am offering the right level of support or attention. So let's get people of actual differing backgrounds. Let's practice diversity and let's bring them in so that we have these differing perspectives. It's not just our perspective. It's not just our insight, so that we can do this right. And fortunately, it came together exceptionally well. And the individuals who we brought into that space ended up being everything that we could have ever imagined. And they helped.
Unfortunately, it's because you did it. It wasn't unfortunate. It didn't fall into our laps. It happened because there was a concerted effort to make it happen.
I agree, but I also think that lots of organizations do that. Lots of organizations try to bring together the right people. And it doesn't always work. It doesn't work. I remember trying to start DE&I initiatives for years that never came to pass. And so, and we had all what we thought were the right people in the room, and it didn't come to fruition. So having those, of course, it took the step of us making it happen and having the right intention and really seeking out the right people. But I do feel like there was great fortune in the sense that it did work. It worked. The personalities worked. The caring was there. The intention was there. And everybody was equally as passionate about doing it right.
So now tell us about the award, because I think that's also just so unique and different. And
so the 3D awards represent 3 diversity, equity, and inclusion awards across individuals, agencies, and work. So one of the things that we were adamant about was that the work specifically be looked at through a different lens. We've now included not only how many people were represented in the work, what community was impacted by the work, but how did you actually go about the strategy and research? Who did you work with to actually get this information, and were they from these communities? Who did you have on the production team? Who was doing hair and makeup? Who was running the camera? Because if that team wasn't diverse either, are you really practicing inclusion? Are you really creating a space that is diverse? And then furthermore, like what is the goal? What was the outcome? And was that truly focused on making sales, or was it actually focused on making a real impact and sharing something that granted awareness while still supporting the brand. So that was one of our greatest focuses. And then we also wanted to further amplify agencies that were not just doing, again, the numbers, that weren't just focusing on how many people we can hire, but also we're focused on what types of programming are we offering both internally and externally? How are we making an impact as an organization? How do we stand up and show face and not just do a black square, but actually represent each one of these backgrounds with a sense of equity? And so that was another piece that was really big for us. And then when it came to the person of the year, the DE&I, individual of the year, one of our greatest focuses was, are you mentoring others? Are you actually elevating the individuals who think that they'll never make it? How are you impacting your community and the culture of your organization? And so we wanted to really dig into what DE&I truly was and touch on some of these things that I don't think many corporations are thinking about, and certainly not many of the DE&I awards that currently are in existence.
I'm speechless. I mean, seriously, because again, I think, as you say, I mean, I don't think the awards that are out there are as well thought out as this, and I don't think that the people who think about these things are thinking about it in as broad a way as you are, and what real diversity actually means. And on top of all of this, on top of the fact that you've changed the world, and seriously changed the world in our industry, you just got engaged.
I did. Well, I appreciate
congratulations, and mazel tov.
Thank you
To a lovely young man.
Yes.
Who rate very highly.
Yes. Our relationship represents a sense of diversity as well. So, and we learn and grow from one another by understanding each other's cultures more and more every day. So yes, I am very excited about being engaged.
Good. Well, I'm looking forward to celebrating. And I feel terrible because the truth is, only a couple of months ago, we were able to do these in person, sort of in that lull that happened in the middle. And now we're back to this zoomy boomy stuff, which is like, just not as much fun. But I feel your energy coming through to me.
Yeah.
And your love. I feel it, but I so would have rather have done this face to face and
absolutely
you, and just felt your energy coming across in the waves that I know it is.
I agree. It would have been great. I do want to circle back really, really quickly before we wrap up, and just note that when it comes to the awards that we're bringing forth through this board, I think that the most important thing is that we're holding individuals accountable. And I don't think that that's something that we're focused on in corporations necessarily. I don't think that that's like, we'll talk about these are the things that need to change, but if they never change, who's actually holding you accountable? And so these awards are specifically focused on accountability. How are you actually making an impact? How are you actually making a change? You can't just say that you are. You have to show us that you're really doing the work. So,
and for those who know my predilection for words, accountability, not responsibility. Accountability is a much higher order, and Destiny uses the right words because she understands accountability like no one else. Oh, yes, I don't even know what to say. It's been an incredible opportunity to talk to you and to learn again, and for everybody else to learn from you.
The feeling is very mutual.
I think your group, the board, the advisory board has done an incredible job, and in defining DE&I, although those of us who know will always look at it as
Yeah.
DI,
Yeah.
but in defining it in a way that I think is different than many companies have. And so please, those of you listening, feel free to reach out to New York festivals, use our language, use the language, read about these awards, get everything that you need to know so that you can actually enter and be part of this, and really hold yourself up to the higher authority, hold yourself up to the accountability. Even if you don't win, even if you don't make it, even if after you fill it all out and you realize that you don't deserve it, that in and of itself has made us all successful.
Absolutely. I want to
nothing to be embarrassed about. It just make us all successful. Even if you feel after you fill it out, oh my God, what am I doing? There's no way. Like they're going to laugh at me. Throw it away, but learn.
Yeah. I do want to take a moment since we're speaking to this and just thank everyone who was a founding member of the board. So a big shout out to Stephanie Small, a big shout out to Emi Kamazaki, a great shout out to Clara Luo, who also recently got engaged. So congratulations. And also to Luis. We are so grateful to all of you for the hard work that you have done. And I am so glad to see what has been produced as a result of us coming together and really trying to show the significance and importance of doing this right. So thank you guys.
So, Destiny Silent K Danger Chambers, Vice President, Head of Marketing for Lippe Taylor, FOD, friend of David, FOD, all big bold letters, family of David, who just got engaged. Thank you so much for everything you've done for New York festivals, but also for our industry, for the community. With people like you and your advisory board, you're going to change the world, you're going to change our industry, and you're going to do it the way you taught me, one person at a time, but always with the bigger picture in the back of your head.
I hope so, and I say that humbly.
I can't thank you enough for that. And so on behalf of New York Festivals and on behalf of myself, David Sable, thank you so much for listening again. Thank you once again, Destiny, for being such an incredible part of the festival this year and in the future as the D&I board, and be such an important part of what we plan to do and how we're going to move forward. And if you like this, please share it. Share it, listen, learn, enter, or don't, but learn, and be well. New York Festivals out.